It began with a slow, deliberate smirk, sharp enough to wound, without a word, as Donald Trump leaned back in his chair, arms crossed with the confidence of a man who believed the debate stage was his alone. The Fox News special streamed live. 2 million as he scoffed, jerking a thumb toward Ibrahim Traoré, who sat calm and unreadable, his eyes cutting through the air like a scalpel. "He's not a leader," Trump declared, voice rising like a performer chasing applause. "He's just another rebel who got lucky with a microphone and a few angry speeches. You don't build nations on emotion, you build them with power. You talk about revolution like it's some romantic film. But here in the real world, in America, we set the standard, we make the rules. You're not a revolution, you're just noise." The crowd murmured, some laughing, others stiffening. But Traoré didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned toward his mic, his voice low, steady, and razor sharp. "You think I'm noise because I don't echo your system, because I wasn't born into applause. But revolution doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't need your playbook. I don't follow your rules, because I wrote new ones." The studio froze as Trump's smile flickered, and Traoré pressed on. "You call me a rebel, and I accept, because rebels shake thrones that pretend to be eternal. And this," he gestured to the cameras, the lights, the polished stage, "this is not a crown, this is a stage. I didn't come to perform, I came to dismantle." In that instant, the atmosphere shifted. Laughter died, a few heads nodded, brows furrowed, and Trump blinked just once, but enough for the moment to land. Something new had entered the room, something immune to applause, ratings, or legacies. A revolution in a tailored suit, speaking like thunder, leaving the studio in absolute silence. It was the kind of silence that didn't wait to be filled, the kind that carried weight. And even the moderator's seasoned host with years of live television hesitated, her hand hovering over the cue cards as if they no longer mattered. Trump shifted in his seat, unsettled. He was used to roars, cheers, even boos, but not this. Not a silence that unnerved him. "You done?" he finally asked, his voice flattered now. "Because let me be clear, you don't rewrite rules in a world you didn't build." Traoré's gaze didn't waver. "That's exactly why I rewrite them," he replied. And the crowd stirred not in cheers or jeers, but in a murmur of interest that couldn't be spun. Trump tried to regain momentum. "You think this is some fantasy game of power? Let me remind you, America holds the cards. We've held them for a century. We fund, we arm, we decide." Traoré leaned in, his voice cold and precise. "Then maybe it's time someone reshuffled the deck." The cameras caught Trump's nostrils flare, his jaw tighten, the flicker of tension running through his posture, while Traoré stayed composed, weaponizing calm. "Gentlemen, let's stay on topic," the moderator finally interjected. "This segment is about global leadership." Traoré nodded slowly. "Exactly, and leadership isn't inherited, it's earned." He turned back to Trump. "You lead with walls and threats. I lead with courage and consequence. One of us fears change, the other is change." The line landed like a drumbeat, sharp, rhythmic final. Already, clips of the exchange were racing across social media, comment sections exploding with reactions. He dismantled Trump without raising his voice. This is what real power sounds like. Traoré is a different kind of storm. Something had shifted not only in the studio, but across every screen, in every living room. The revolution had entered the broadcast, and it hadn't knocked. The host tried again to regain order. "Let's focus on diplomacy. President Trump, what would you say to critics who claim America's influence is slipping?" Trump smirked. "We're still the biggest game in town," Trump declared. "Everyone wants a seat at our table, even if they pretend they don't." But Traoré didn't wait for a cue. "Some of us are building our own table," he said, calmly, "and we're not asking for chairs." The mood shifted instantly, like thunder rolling behind a closed door. Trump leaned back with a dismissive shrug. You build with what? Dust and slogans. Let's be real, without American tech, American weapons, American dollars, you're a slogan, not a structure. Traoré's eyes locked onto him, cold and precise. Without African minerals, African labor, African silence, you're not a superpower. You're a borrower in a stolen suit. The room tightened. Trump blinked. The moderator stayed frozen, unwilling to cut in. Traoré pressed forward. We die so your smartphones work. Our ground gives you gold, cobalt, lithium, yet you sit there and talk like you invented power. You didn't invent anything. You outsourced it. Trump tried to laugh, but his hands betrayed him, clasping tighter. And now, Traoré continued, leaning forward just enough, we're learning to say no. No to your pity. No to your deals. No to your definitions. You call us rebels because your empire was built on obedience. I'm not here to obey. I'm here to rebuild. It was no longer a debate. It was a rupture. Rival networks began cutting to the moment, while tweets burst across timelines. This isn't just a clapback. It's a global shift. Traoré hadn't raised his voice, he had raised the stakes. Trump, for the first time, faced someone who wouldn't blink. The audience wasn't watching an argument anymore. They were witnessing one man redefine it. That was more dangerous than any raised fist. And when Traoré finished, the studio didn't erupt with applause or outrage, it simply listened. That silence unsettled Trump more than anything. He leaned forward now, both elbows on the table, his voice lower, tighter. You talk like you've got the upper hand, Trump said, voice booming. But let me remind you, we still run the board. You've got pride. We've got power. Traoré didn't flinch. Power that can't handle words, he asked coolly. Sounds fragile. Trump's brow tightened. You think this is a game? You really believe one man like you can stop the machine we built? Traoré's reply hit like a drumbeat. Not stop it, outgrow it. The host froze between awe and panic. While in the control room, producers whispered about cutting to commercial, but no one dared pull the plug. The cameras stayed fixed. Trump's smile returned, but thinner now, more calculation than confidence. Careful, he warned. You're walking a fine line. Traoré didn't miss a beat. You say line like it's a threat, but I walk lines, everyday fault lines, border lines, red lines you drew in our sand. He paused, eyes steady, then finished quietly. The difference is, I don't walk them to survive. I walk them to erase them. For the first time, Trump leaned back, silent, not because he lacked words, but because he wasn't sure which one still worked. Online, clips of the exchange erupted, captions flashing. This isn't rhetoric, it's resistance. Commentators noted that Traoré spoke like a man unafraid of collapse because he wasn't chained to what might fall. Trump's poker face cracked. The silence itself was a verdict. What began as political theater had turned into something else, not just a clash of egos, but a collision of worldviews. The studio lights dimmed for dramatic effect, unnoticed by either man. This wasn't a debate anymore, it was a standoff. Trump crossed his arms, raising his voice again. Let's be honest. Without America, where would you be? No roads, no medicine, no economy. We built the fire. You just warmed your hands. It was meant to sting, to diminish. But Traoré only smiled. A fire built on stolen wood doesn't make you a craftsman, he said. It makes you a thief. Trump blinked. Traoré's voice cut deeper. You didn't build the fire, you lit it with someone else's match. You used our labor, our minerals, our silence, and then claimed the light as your own. The audience held its breath. Trump leaned forward, fists clenched. You're rewriting history. No, Traoré replied calmly. I'm reading it without your edits. The moderator tried to intervene. Gentlemen, perhaps we can bring the tone down, but Traoré cut in. No, let it stay where it is. Because for once, the Tone doesn't serve them. Trump jabbed a finger. You want to talk big? Fine. But talk doesn't move markets. It doesn't keep missiles out of the air. It doesn't pay bills. Traoré didn't blink. I'm not here to impress stockholders. I'm here to wake up my people and apparently a few of yours too. Phones buzzed, hashtags trended, and within minutes, Traoré was the most searched name in America. Some called him dangerous, others called him necessary. And for the first time, Trump's gaze faltered, dropping for half a second before he caught himself. The internet clipped it, looped it, dissected it. Back in the studio, Trump straightened his tie and pressed harder. You talk like a preacher, he said, voice cool but cutting. But leadership isn't about words, it's about results. And your country, what does it have to show? Traoré's voice stayed even. We don't measure worth in skyscrapers or stock prices. We measure it in resilience. In the fact that after everything you threw at U.S. sanctions, coups, media smears, we're still standing. Trump laughed harshly. Standing, you're isolated. You're poor. You're small. Traoré raised an eyebrow. Then why are you sweating? The crowd stirred. Trump gestured broadly. Because this is theater. You put on a show. I've built empires. You've built headlines. I didn't come here to perform, Traoré answered. I came to disrupt. Trump shot back instantly. And how's that working out for you? Traoré leaned in, his voice sharpened to a blade. Better than expected. Because the game you're playing, power, image, dying. We're not trying to win it. We're replacing it. Trump smirked. You can't replace what you don't understand. Traoré smiled. And you can't defend what you never owned. Silence louder than any outburst hung. In the studio, echoing across millions of screens worldwide. Some watched in disbelief, others in awe, but all were witnessing something rare. A man unafraid to stare the West in the eye and speak as its equal, not as a guest, not as a student, but as a rival. Trump crossed his arms, his trademark confidence, flickering for just a second before he leaned back, adopting a patronizing calm. You're young, he said, voice low and deliberate. You'll learn how the world works. Eventually you'll see people like me don't lose. We shape the outcome. Traoré blinked once. That's your fear talking. Trump chuckled. Fear, son, I've negotiated with nuclear powers. You lead a landlocked country, barely on the map and, yet, here we are. On the same stage, Traoré shot back, his voice sharp, speaking to the same audience. You didn't invite me. I arrived. That's the difference. Trump waved, dismissively. You're loud, but the system doesn't move for noise. No, Traoré countered, steady as stone. It moves for momentum. And that's what we have. People are tired of polished liars. They want raw truth, even when it's uncomfortable. The moderator tried to intervene, but the tension swallowed her words. Trump pressed on. You think you're the future? No, Traoré replied evenly. I think you're the past. A gasp rippled through the audience. You built a world where power silenced truth, he continued. But now truth is louder than ever. You used to command. Now you react. Trump's eyes narrowed. You used to intimidate. Now you defend. The line hit like a strike. Even the crew froze mid-motion. Traoré leaned forward, voice low but thunderous. You spent decades building mirrors. We're bringing in the light. For the first time, Trump looked like he was recalculating, while Traoré looked like a man who knew the moment was his. Trump shifted in his seat, his grin thinner now, more forced. You talk a big game, he snapped, but talk isn't legacy. Talk doesn't build countries. Traoré folded his hands calmly. You're right. Talk doesn't build. That's why I don't just talk. Trump pounced. Then tell us what you've built. Go ahead, name one thing. Traoré didn't flinch. I've built a country that stopped begging, a government that listens before it borrows, A military that protects instead of obeys. A people who no longer look overseas to solve their own hunger. Trump shook his head. That's not power, that's desperation. No, Traoré replied, calm and unshaken. It's independence. Something you forgot exists outside. Your flag. Trump's voice rose. You wouldn't even be on this stage without American support. You wouldn't have microphones, or satellites. Or I wouldn't have puppets, either. Traoré cut in, cool and devastating. Silence followed. He stood, voice steady as iron. You shout, I build. That is the difference between us. One of us believes power is inherited, the other earns it. Trump rose too, bristling. I earned everything I have. Traoré's gaze didn't move. Then why do you keep shouting to prove it? The crowd erupted, and even some of Trump's supporters looked shaken. Calmly Traoré delivered the next blow. You inherited applause. I inherited silence. But I made the silence listen. Trump's smile was gone, his finger jabbing the air. You think this makes you a hero? You're tearing things down? I'm tearing down what was built on our backs, Traoré answered evenly. There's a difference. You're making enemies, Trump snapped. I'm making space, Traoré countered, for my people to stand, to breathe, to stop surviving and start deciding. The moderator tried to intervene, but Trump waved him off. No, let him talk. Let him pretend he's more than just a moment. Traoré turned fully toward him. A moment, he said softly. You confuse me with a headline. I'm not here for a season. I'm here for a shift. Trump scoffed. All this pride and your country still depends on aid. Because aid, Traoré replied, stepping forward, was designed to create dependence. You don't send help, you send control wrapped in a flag. The studio froze. His voice cut lower, deliberate. You want obedience. I want dignity. Trump muttered. You'll regret that tone. Traoré didn't blink. I don't speak in tones. I speak in truths, and truth doesn't beg. Trump tried to answer, but stumbled over his words. Without raising his voice, Traoré delivered the line that sent shockwaves through the room. You want the world to stay beneath you? I want mine to stand beside me. Even the cameras seemed to pause. A silence fell not of fear, but of recognition. The world was hearing something it hadn't expected. And as the debate wound down, the air in the studio was electric, not with applause, but with awareness. Trump looked stunned, not because he'd lost an argument he was used to noise, confrontation, fire, but because somehow this time, it hadn't been fire. It was stillness, heavy with truth and gravity. Traoré stood tall, unshaken by the lights, untouched by the stage, his hands resting calmly at his sides. No theatrics, no performance, only presence. The moderator tried to wrap up the debate. Tonight, we have witnessed an exchange of ideologies, of visions for the world, and whatever side you take, this moment will be remembered. But few were listening. All eyes were fixed on the man who had entered without a suit, without an army, without a script, yet had shaken the room with nothing but unvarnished truths. One by one, the audience rose to their feet, not clapping, just standing, as though applause was too small for what they had seen. Traoré nodded once, not a bow, never a bow, but an acknowledgement, a recognition. Trump turned away, his jaw tight, his silence louder than any rebuttal. In that moment, it was undeniable. Power did not always wear a tie, and revolutions did not always roar. Sometimes they simply stood, steady and unbending, refusing to kneel. The camera pulled back, framing Traoré as he walked off stage. The lights dimmed, and in the hush that followed, millions watching felt something shift. He had walked in as a guest. He walked out as a reminder. Not every leader waits for permission, some simply lead. This wasn't a debate. It was a collision between power and principle. Trump embodied the old world, where the loudest voice mistakes itself for truth and applause for respect. But Ibrahim Traoré hadn't come to impress. He came to remind, real leadership doesn't shout, it builds, it stands, it endures. While Trump performed for the cameras, Traoré spoke to history. And when he declared, "I am the revolution," he didn't need the crowd to believe him. He already had something louder than applause: conviction. Some men chase power, others define it. That night, Traoré did.